Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Jonny McCoy. Jonny is a lawyer and the founder and CEO of the app WhiteFlag, which is the first mental health app with immediate customized peer support that is changing the way people communicate and heal. Jonny was such a blast to have on, and this is honest. This story is super powerful. I mentioned it in the Instagram promo, but I literally was left speechless because his story is just as heartbreaking as it is, as insane as it is, for lack of a better term. It is super inspiring, and I can't wait for you guys to listen. I do want to implement some trigger warnings as the topics of suicide, drug abuse, like parental abuse, everything comes into play. So if these are triggers for you, this is not the episode for you. Please log off. And if you do feel triggered during the episode, please log off as well. But honestly, it's just, this was such a I don't even know how else to describe it. It was just such a powerful episode. So thank you so much, Jonny, for coming on and for sharing this story. It's such an honor to be the person that gets to share your story. Now, for everyone who's listened before, you know the drill, but if you haven't been here before, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to y'all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. We are good to go. Jonny, what's going on, man? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm a fan of the podcast. Listen to a couple episodes. You're doing some good work, particularly combating the stigma. That's the most important thing. That's why we share, to feel better. We share to heal, but we also share to heal each other and help other individuals see and hear, that it's okay to talk about this kind of stuff. So I appreciate what you're doing for the movement. It's great, man. Happy to
Thank
be here.
Thank you, man. I couldn't agree more. I wanted to ask you, I wanted to go all the way back to start this episode and have you just share your story and what you've personally gone through. So where does your whole journey with mental health and mental illness, like where does that all begin?
Good question. And I appreciate you wording it like that. Like, where does it actually begin? Because most individuals think it begins with your trauma, your car accident, with your experience in the military. But the reality of the situation is trauma and mental illness is generational. So that's why it's so important for us to know where we come from and who we are. And that's where my story starts. I didn't know about any of this until a couple of years ago, and I'm 38 years old now. So my journey started before I was born, much longer before I was born. My father, he was a typical Southern man living in rural South Carolina. He worked on peach farms and tobacco farms, shucking corn and that kind of thing. Very little electricity, obviously no phones when he was growing up out there in the rural areas of the farmland. And my great grandfather lived out there. After he had gone through a divorce, he lived in a little quiet house in the middle of the country, no neighbors, dirt road, no electricity, and my father and his uncles took turns visiting with my great grandfather to make sure that he was healing and doing okay from his divorce. Back then, they didn't call it healing; they just said that he was lonely.
Mm.
And it was my dad's turn to go in and check on him and stay the night with him. And it was a Thursday night. My father got there at 7 p.m. And as the car that dropped him off drove away, he was totally alone. And no cell phones, no phones. Nobody was within even a screaming distance. And he walks in. There's no electricity going on in the house. There's no fire burning like usual. So he heads towards the bedroom where my great grandfather used to spend a lot of his time reading and sitting with my dad. And when he walked in, there was my grandfather laying in the bed. He had taken a pistol and blown his head off. He put it in his mouth and pulled the trigger. And my father walked in and saw him clenching a note, saw him clenching a gun, and saw the blood everywhere, and he froze. He was locked. He was locked in a fight, flight, freeze. Didn't know what to do, so he just sat at the end of the room for 12 hours. So he goes through the whole day. So he sat with my great grandfather all night long. not knowing if a ghost was going to pop out, not knowing, as a 12-year-old boy, if he had been wrong or why his own grandfather would do that for him to find. And he went to school, went to football, and came home, and he told the first and only person he ever told, my grandmother, his mother. And she looked at him and said, "Whatever you do, don't tell anybody."
Mm.
So at the funeral, nobody talked about it being a suicide. Nobody talked about any of it. They covered it up and never discussed it ever. And my father, a couple years later, married my mother, and he had not even begun his journey of healing. And it's interesting because when my father and mother talk about their traumas from their childhood, they always say, "Well, I don't let that affect me." And here it comes. So my father began physically and verbally abusing my mother pretty early on in their marriage, particularly when my older brother was, you know, in utero and being born, as well as me. A lot of physical, lot of verbal, and I was born with generalized anxiety disorder. A couple years later, 2 years later, my mom developed cancer, and so she was gone out of the house, and so I began developing separation anxiety, all sorts of panic disorders, and I was only 2 or 3 or 4 years when I first started having panic attacks. Eventually, my mom came home and she got better, but I was unable to attend kindergarten. She would have to come pick me up every day from first grade. Nobody knew what was wrong with me. They just called it a nervous stomach. And then eventually, my trauma started to unfold. My father, when I was 10 years old, um, I, uh, I, I, I missed baseball practice so that I could spend some time with my buddy. And my mom allowed it to happen. And as we were walking up the dirt road, this is in old Orlando, Florida, right outside Orlando, these little communities. My father worked at Disney, and I'm walking up the road and I'm pushing my bike through the thick sand, and I can still feel it, being difficult to get through. And my buddy was walking with me, and as we turned the corner on the dirt road, I saw my father being placed in the back of a police car, and that was the first time I'd ever seen anybody get arrested. And
Mm.
he was standing next to the car with the handcuffs behind his back. He looked over at me, his 10-year-old son, and the only thing that he said was, "Make sure your mother calls my attorney." And that was the first time I'd ever heard that word, attorney. I didn't know what any of that meant. And I remember vividly walking to the house and the door opening and there being, EMT workers there trying to work on my mom's face, but she had been hit in the face with a 2-liter bottle. And luckily she didn't mean to call 911, but she did. She hit 9-1, and then he threw the bottle and hit her, and her finger slipped and she hit one, and she hung up and they showed up. And that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was a couple of days later when my father got home, he made sure to tell his 10-year-old son, who was rife with mental illness and anxiety, which he didn't know about at the time, of course, how awful jail is. And he vividly in detail described the screaming and the threats and the violence and the lights and the noises. And I just remember feeling like this is the guy who I'm most afraid of. This is the person who everybody, and everybody who I respect, this type of experience is what takes place when you go to jail. So that locked in right there. And after my dad got out of jail, he got a little bit of help and he stopped the physical violence, but the verbal continued. And then all of a sudden, when I hit 12 years old, after we moved cities because of what took place, my mom was a full blown alcoholic at this time, and not the kind that you have beers with, the kind that doesn't leave her room. And if she does, her sweatpants are covered in feces and whatever else may be there. I used to try to clean up my mom in the area so that when my dad would get home, there wouldn't be like mass chaos and fighting in the house, because nobody really understood what was going on with my mom except for me. Anxiety, you're in tune with it. And I was just watching her slowly and slowly die.
Mm.
Eventually, we got her off to rehab when I was in high school, and so I was left at home. My older brother was in college, so it was just me and my little brother. My dad was there, but my dad's got a lot of mental health issues, so he was totally, totally tuned out to what we were doing. I used to email my mom's therapist and call her and ask him for recipes so that I could make my little brother dinner, so that it would remind him of mom. So then I end up in college, and I'm diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and that's the first time my parents ever come up and visit me. I was in the hospital for a month and a half, and for people who deal with anxiety, they know all about inflammatory bowel issues. That was certainly something that I struggled with continuously. And then after I got out of the hospital, I decided right then and there that I was not going to let anything stop me. That I was going to become all I could be, continue my education, and just get out of the house, get out of this life, and break the generational curse of whatever it is that I was trapped in. So I get in law school on the morning of orientation. I begged all of these board of trustees to write me letters and get me in because I didn't know anybody. I have no family connections. I don't even know any lawyers, didn't at the time. So the one guy didn't show up. So I got in the morning of orientation to law school. And they called me that guy's name in every class for the first 2 weeks. But then I graduated and I did well. I graduated in the top of my class. I got one of the best jobs at corporate law firm downtown Columbia. And this is where things take a real dramatic turn. So with my Crohn's disease, I've spent less time out drinking at bars and more time trying to figure out, the best rhythm to get my stomach in. And so it was a rehearsal dinner on a Friday night, and lawyers hang out with lawyers, man. So the other lawyers that I went to school with came in from out of town for this wedding. I said, listen, you guys can stay with me. Particularly one of them who was a prosecutor at the time, really, really good guy. And played football at Presbyterian College, said the blessing, before you had any meal, even at McDonald's, didn't matter. And so I said, well, we go to the rehearsal dinner. I'll come pick you up afterwards and let me know. So I go downtown to pick him up. He lets me know, and he is about 100 feet away from the door of the restaurant, the bar that he told me that he was going to be at. And so I get down there, and eventually I go inside the restaurant to get him to close out his tab, and to close out any other friends that wanted to ride home. So when I walk back outside, he is on the ground, and three police officers are on top of him. And I remember him saying like, you're hurting me. And I walk up, and I'm about 6 feet away at the time, and I wait for them to stand him up. And as they stand him up, I'm thinking, well, this guy was literally just outside on the wall texting a minute ago. I know this must be the wrong guy. So I thought they were just, showing force. And so I walk up and I ask, is he being arrested? Are y'all taking him to jail? And they push me, and they get in my face. And I said, oh, whoa, okay. All right. Just tell me which jail you're taking him to so I can go pick him up in the morning. I'm an attorney. He's got a wedding to go to. Are you taking him to Alvin Glen? Or are you taking him to Columbia City? And they didn't like that. They didn't like that I said I was an attorney. And so they arrested me, and they took us both back to the cop car. And I kept saying, what's going on, man? Like, you can't just arrest me for asking questions. That's the only thing I learned in law school. You can question, you can ask anything you want. I mean, you could
Hmm.
say obscenities and all that. I never did any of that. So he kept saying, you're running your mouth. That's why you got arrested, running your mouth, asking questions. And I was like, okay. So they take us to jail. And on the drive there, we're in the back of the car together. On the drive there, I feel it starting to set in. And I'm like, I feel like I can't leave, and that I have no idea what's going on, and it starts weighing on me heavily, and I start feeling like I'm going into panic. And when we get there, they put us in a jail cell with 8 other individuals in one little teeny bench, probably a room for like 4 people. And as we're in that room, everybody's going through what happened to them. And it's all these individuals there was an attempted murder, there was assault and battery, there was DUI, there was, burglary. We were the only guys in there for like the lowest level misdemeanors you can possibly be in there. I found out that I was charged with interfering with an arrest, and my friend was charged with trespassing. So we didn't find that out until we got there. So one by one, they started letting out all these guys who were covered in blood and had all these assault and battery, these big charges. And then they leave the three of us in there, my friend and myself, and the guy who was in there for attempted murder. So the three of us, they come and they bring us our orange jumpsuits, and they say, you guys got to change. The police sometimes don't turn your paperwork in on time, and this is how they hold you for 72 hours. That's usually your punishment. So the police didn't turn our paperwork in on time, and we were shifted to general population, and that's where I witnessed somebody take their own life. I watched a suicide. And I remember looking out the window of my cell to the guy laying on the floor out there after they cut him down and brought him down and they told us to get in our rooms. And I remember the shock and the panic that erupted throughout my body. And I remember thinking and telling my friend, it's so bad in here that that guy just killed himself.
Mm.
And I remember thinking my dad was right. I remember thinking over and over again, he was right. He was right. He was right. And then luckily, as the day wore on, we started using our contacts, and eventually a wonderful legislator called the judge at the jail, and she came down at midnight, and we're stepping over the dead body to get to the bond hearing in the middle of the night. So then after the bond hearing, where the judge almost breaks down crying because you have to read the facts, and now she knows that our lives are ruined, or at least mine is. I was shook.
Mhm.
And and after she let us out, that was the moment that everything changed, because we went back to our room and the guy was still laying there, and they so I knew I was bonded out, but we were still in there for another 4.5 hours, just sitting, stuck, not knowing when we were going to get out. The crime scene investigators show up, of course we're like right there with it. And I broke, man. I broke. So 2 days later, I finally was diagnosed with PTSD. I was given my first benzodiazepine, diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, and I tried to go to work, and I was just crying and sleepy, and I'd been awake for a few days. So I knew I had no choice but to resign. And I was the highest educated person in the history of my family. I was making the most money, and here I am. I got to quit. So I moved back home to these individuals in Myrtle Beach where I had grown up, and I had to sacrifice. I had to live in a toxic environment. And when I got home, I realized, you know, they're 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 going to come back after me. And the reason why is because before I came home to Myrtle Beach, I went and got my hair cut at a hair, my place that I traditionally got my hair cut. And before you move home, you want to make sure you get your cut. And the young lady who was cutting my hair was a close friend of mine, and she started shaking and tearing up, and she said, there's a surveillance video. And that was the moment that everything changed. I went and got a USB. I called the bar owner. He called his attorney. He was on his way out to the Phillies World Series game. This was in 2009. And that was day 6 after the incident happened. On day 7, the video is erased. So on day 6, I go in there. It looks like Steven Spielberg had set up these cameras outside of this little rinky-dink bar. And it's clear as day. I didn't touch anybody. I didn't do anything. Kipped it. And the other individual who got arrested didn't do anything. And then I filed a lawsuit after my father told me that he wouldn't talk to me anymore if I did so. And the other individual who was involved didn't want to get involved in the lawsuit, but I had to. So I filed the lawsuit, and the video went viral, and it was all over the news, and the FBI got involved, and it turned out to be that they were doing a lot of shady corruption downtown to the college students, and they just thought that's who we were. And in that 4-year battle, where I battled for my sanity, battled for my life versus the police department, it tore me apart.
Mhm.
And they deposed my father. They went into his arrest. They deposed my mother. They went into her alcohol. They deposed my brothers and my ex-girlfriends. They went after everybody they possibly could, everything that they could possibly do to break me. And it almost worked. I was getting letters in the mail, pictures of the jail cell that I was in, cell number 11, saying we're going to put you back in there. Uh, Eventually, the police, the attorneys on the other side realized that all they had to do was threaten me with jail, and I was in serious issues because they were reading my mental health records at the time. And so these individuals started saying, it looks like he grabbed her by the arm. So we're going to try to raise his charges to assault on a police officer. And that, broke me. So what I did was I went and found a criminal defense lawyer in my little area in Myrtle Beach. And I said, listen, just give me a couple $100. I just want to learn from you, and I'll take over your law firm after you're gone. I started winning immediately. I won every felony trial I ever tried, and every single time I won on police misconduct. I could always find a lie. I could always find where they were exaggerating and covering up. And It wasn't heroic. I was triggering myself over and over again, reading, oh, they're still doing this. They're doing this every day to my friends, to the people in my community. And so my Xanax uh, prescription kept climbing and climbing because I was going through withdrawals on the day. So let's say a normal person takes one blue Xanax and they're asleep for 12 hours. In the end, I was taking 6 milligrams of Xanax a day,
Mm.
operating the highest level that you can operate at as an attorney. I mean, you can Google me right now. I was and still am, one of the best attorneys in the state, no doubt about that. And and I was doing it all broken and trying to hold myself together with this glue of Xanax. And then eventually it got to the point where, we knew that we couldn't up the dose anymore. I was on, 4 milligrams prescribed and I was hoarding, trying to make sure that I could have enough to get to six. So that my wife immigrates here from Brazil. That's a long story. I was backpacking through South America trying to find a reason to stay alive, and I met her, and I immigrated her here. And 2 months after we got married, I had been awake for a couple of days because of my PTSD and my withdrawals, and I took a bunch of sleeping medicine, and that will forever be known as my suicide attempt. I woke up. I woke up with her in the other room, and I realized that was it. I'm either going to fight for my life and die a noble way, or I'm going to commit to leaving the earth and ending my pain forever. And so I enrolled in an executive trauma treatment facility down in Ocala, Florida, called the Refuge, a Judy Crane facility where they treat the trauma first, and then they try to, then they attack the coping stuff, the addiction and the Xanax. And so I got down there and I timed it on, it was July 20th, and I timed it so August 24th or whatever it was family week. And I told my wife, I'm going to be off of these Xanax in 24 days so that when you get there for family week, I'm going to be battling back. And I had no idea. I had no clue. I mean, I heard that Xanax was the worst thing to get off of. I had heard that you could die from it. But I'd already committed to dying. I was fine with it, and I just wanted to go out a noble way. And so I started my own self taper when I got to the refuge, and they switched me from 6 milligrams of Xanax to 60 milligrams of Valium, and they said you can stay on 60 milligrams of Valium your whole time here, or you can try to come off. Nobody supervised it. I sat down in my journal and I just wrote it 60, 55, 50, 45, all the way down to zero. And if you've ever read about withdrawals from benzodiazepines, I mean, I was having seizures. I fractured a little area of my back of my jaw. I tore some organs. I had to have surgery. I know I mean, my resting heart rate when I would wake up would be 230. My shirt would be pounding through, and I would just be laying there in bed, thinking, "Please, please, don't wake up. Please don't wake up." And I couldn't even call my wife. I would call her, and I would just like make noises into the phone. I was not nonverbal. I laid in the bathtub for hours, and it was just everything was coming out, and then eventually it all turned to blood, and I was like, "Well, I think this is it." And I just stayed in there, man. And then my roommate was a guy who'd done 5 tours of duty in Afghanistan, and this guy was a total badass, still is. And he saved my life. He carried me to and from the hospital that we have there on campus, and he sat with me next to me at the tub and just walked me through it. And I'm alive because of him. And so that's when I realized what peer support does. That's when I realized that connection can pull you out of the darkness, and that's the only thing that can help in some ways. And so when I returned home from the refuge, I was still nonverbal. I still couldn't go outside. I still had issues with eating and loud noises. And then 3 or 4 months went by, and I wasn't getting better. And you're talking about an attorney performing at a high level, speaking on camera live. I couldn't even answer the phone. I couldn't even text somebody back. I couldn't even have my phone. And so I eventually ended up in an outpatient at MUSC in Charleston, an outpatient. And from there, I decided that I was going to fight my way out of it. After 6 months, it was New Year's Day, right after I gotten out, and I said, you know what? I'm going to try to smoke some marijuana this morning and see what happens. And that was the beginning of my full recovery. Once I started smoking, I was able to eat, talk, laugh. And within a month, I wanted to start attending support groups with peer support, and there wasn't any, none in South Carolina. And so I said, well, somebody's supposed to be making these, must be me. So
Mm.
I created the areas first: PTSD, anxiety, and generalized anxiety support groups. We also taught depression and grief. We started out with 2 people in a garage, and we ended up, multiplying to 50 people. We had a free space at the YMCA. 50 people would come; they would all share, and we had over 1,000 members online of our group, and it was wonderful. And then COVID hit, and I created a support group chat, and that's when I realized these individuals just need to connect 24 hours a day. And so the world shut down, and I took all the money that I had won from a civil rights case, and I put it into White Flag and started building it in March of 2020. And the civil rights case that I won, this is where my story starts to have a little bit of triumph in it. So after my lawsuit ended, I won $300,000. It's all on the internet. And I took what little bit was left over after attorney's fees and my $60,000 worth of medical bills, and I put it into my little law firm. I opened law to Jonny McCoy, and we did criminal defense. And then eventually, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of reading all this stuff. I'm going to start doing civil rights. And this guy called me, and he said, listen, a buddy of mine is in the hospital. They're saying that he shot at the police. They say that the reason that they shot him was because they were shooting at him, and that he's this big drug dealer. Well, all sorts of red flags go off when you hear that. You're like, well, this doesn't sound like somebody who can afford an attorney. That's the first thing that most people would think. And then the second thing is, well, he shot at the cops in South Carolina. I don't want to be involved in that.
Mm.
But I asked him one question, and you know what it was? I asked him, I said, what kind of drugs? And he said, marijuana. And I said, I'll go see him right now. So I go over to the hospital, and as I'm walking into the hospital in Myrtle Beach Grand Strand Regional Medical Center, I'm threatened with arrest for trespassing. Here I am again, and my instincts from my previous life had taught me to watch out for these kinds of things. So they say, the guy drew it on the tile on the ground. Said, if you cross this tile, we're going to arrest you for trespassing. And I
Wow.
said, listen, I've visited people in death row, I've visited people in the hospital, I've visited people in jail. If there are police in his room, I can be there. That's the rule, and I can visit him. And so I finally get I go outside, I get my private investigator. He comes out, he puts his little private recorder on, and I call it I call up the courthouse. We get a hold of a judge. He faxes over some paperwork. I walk back in, and the COO of the hospital standing there. He's like, "You're not coming in." And I said, "You need to check that paper." They all walk over to the paper. They don't even turn around and say, "Hey, come on up." They start running down the hallway to go up to this guy's room. So when I get up there, finally, they let me in. They're pulling all the stuff out of the room. All these police were there. They were when he was waking up from his 6-week coma. They were saying, "You shot at the police. Don't you remember? You shot at the police." They were trying to create. He had a trach tube in. It wasn't like he could even talk. So his mom is in there yelling, "Get out of here! Get out of here!" Rest her soul. She passed away during the lawsuit. "Get out of here!" And I walk in, and these police are standing over him, saying derogatory things. And I looked at him. I never met the guy before in my life. And I grabbed his hand and I said, "These guys will go to jail before you do. I swear it. I swear it." And I just remember he started crying because, he had been told he was going to go to jail for attempted murder on a police officer when he woke up. And it turned out that this guy who did little music recordings in his house, that this guy, he had been burglarized a year before, and he put a teeny tiny surveillance camera up on his porch. And guess what? All the police officers who showed up that day, they all turned off their body cameras. They turned them on when they were providing aid to them. Six of them, boom, 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 turned on as they were providing aid. Smoke-filled room, all that good stuff. And they said that they knocked, announced, went in. Julian, the guy, pulled his gun and shot him, and they shot him back. Boy, that's not what the surveillance camera showed. Now that one went viral. I mean, all over the world. And what ended up happening was they showed up in plain clothes after a informant told them that she had gotten up marijuana from Julian, from this guy. They showed up. Five of them reached the porch. They were wearing bakevas over their face, backwards baseball caps, jeans, khakis, no police insignia that was visible. AR-15s. They hit the door with the battering ram. They didn't knock. They didn't announce. They didn't say anything. They hit the door with the battering ram, and they unloaded within 8 feet of this guy, and he lived. They hit him 9 times. They shot at him. 29 bullets were fired. They hit him 9 times, and some of the bullets were in the floor, meaning they followed him down. This guy lives and has a surveillance video of them not knocking and announcing. And because of what I went through, I had found all this stuff. The kid didn't even know that his video was recording. He had never looked at it, never once. And then we tested his gun that was in the house. That wasn't fired, never had been fired. And we went through this lawsuit, and the police, they're going, we did nothing wrong. We did nothing wrong. And eventually we settled for $11.25 million.
Mm.
All the officers still working, same job, same roles. Some of them transferred to other police departments, same thing. These officers were called liars by a judge in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they're still signing sworn affidavits arresting people in the area that they were. And so I took the money and I put it all in the white flag, and I said, all right, nothing's changing. I'm accomplishing nothing other than making sure that my client feels like he got a little bit of justice. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to merge my law firm. So I merged my law firm, and I put all of my time, all of my energy and effort into WhiteFlag. And one of the craziest parts about it is one of our initial investors was the sweetheart guy who survived his shooting. And now WhiteFlag is taken off, and he is going to, his family, what's left of him, is going to reap the benefits of him having these opportunities after he lived. And so, yeah, but honestly, my story, there's a lot of tragedy to it. There's a lot of depth and a lot of drama, but there's also some heroes. And this is something that I've never really talked about before. With my lawsuit versus the city of Columbia, the police who arrested me, the first thing that the federal judge, had to decide was whether or not I was in the right or in the wrong, and whether or not the law that I was arrested for was constitutional or not. And this judge, she found that I was in the wrong and that the law was perfectly fine. And I remember beginning to plan for the first time, plan my suicide when my attorneys called me and said that the federal magistrate judge just found the police did the right. Because I don't want to be on an earth where you could be totally doing the right thing and authority be able to just roll you up, run you over like that, and change your life forever. And my attorney said, well, there's an appeal, and it goes up to a higher judge, and whatever he rules, whether he accepts the recommendation or not, it's a recommendation. That's what the ruling will be. So we get a letter saying that the judge, who is a professor at the law school, wants to have the hearing in the law school. And I'm fresh out. I know all these people, 300 of them. So we go in the auditorium, and we're having the hearing, and all of a sudden he starts ruling in my favor. Thank God. So he overturns the law. Forever, the law is known as Jonathan McCoy versus City of Columbia. It stands for the fact that you can't be arrested for asking a question. It's taught in law schools all across the country. But the lower judge found that I was in the wrong. So it still, I was still hurt over the entire system, as it was that close for me to giving up. And flash forward a couple of years later, on the case that I just told you about, the same judge had to find whether or not the kid with the marijuana, who had allegedly sold marijuana, was in the wrong, and whether or not this kid this man, I hate saying kid just because he's a little bit younger, this man was in the wrong, and whether or not this man could move forward with his lawsuit and get justice. And I'm looking at he's paralyzed for life. And it's the same judge, and she renders her opinion, and in finding that the police were wrong, for what they did to him. She cited McCoy versus the City of Columbia, and for her to for after all I had gone through, to be to to know that what I had went through affected Julian's case in a positive way, and to know that that's going to happen for other, for other cases forever. She saved my life for sure, and she didn't even know it. But she quoted McCoy versus City of Columbia in that case, and there are heroes throughout our lives that we don't even know are there, and we don't even know that they intended to do something heroic for us, and that's the gift of living in an elevated conscious with an elevated conscious, to know that our actions affect the greater good of everybody around us, whether or not we see it right away. We have no idea whether or not the slightest gesture may save somebody's life. We have no idea that the person that we're encountering or crossing or dealing with on that day is on the edge of life, or suffering immensely or not. And so when we just live life, by a moral code to do right always, no matter what, because she didn't have to put my name in there. I mean, I'm sure that would be controversial if they saw it when it was going on, but it was uh, it was a heroic act in my story for sure. And so, it's not all bad, it's not all tragic, and White Flag is everything that I've been through. I created the app and the company with the knowledge of what I needed, what would have made me comfortable. I mean, if you get on White Flag, it's black, it's white, it's gold, it's neutral. We don't have any hearts and lights, and we don't tell you to take long walks on the beach, man. It's real. We're in it with you. And, you're not going to talk to me or somebody who's trained. You're going to talk to somebody who's going through the same things you're going through. I mean, we have mothers with postpartum depression talking with mothers with postpartum depression in real time for the first time ever. We have police officer, and that's the thing. I knew that I wasn't changing anything by filing lawsuits, because you're not going to change somebody from doing evil unless you could start with here.
Mm.
So with White Flag, we have a filter on our app where you can say, I'm a police officer, I have PTSD, which 1 out of every 3 shows symptoms, 1 out of every 4 are diagnosed. And you can raise your flag, and now you're only talking to anonymous police officers around the country. You get to talk to them. Hey, I saw this. Hey, I went through that. And these cops go through the worst, man. You got to remember, I'm reading these files. I saw a police officer who found a little girl decomposing in a closet under pounds and pounds of kitty litter, and he was at work the next day.
Mm.
And so, White Flag is for everyone, man. It's for everyone.
Yeah. Did you man, first of all, what a story. Like, thank you for sharing that, Johnny. Seriously,
Whew.
it's a lot, but it's incredibly inspiring. Did you ever let the judge know how much that little action meant to you?
I've only seen her once.
Mm.
Only seen her once, and I was too I was too emotional to say anything. I just, we I don't, in the back of my mind, there's still the possibility that she didn't even know, or her law clerk just put it in there and it was just a recent case. But I mean, we know. And no, this is the first time I've ever told the story ever, um, other than to my therapist and my wife and like 1 or 2 friends that I really trust, because I had to get healthy enough, so after I tell the story, I don't go back, into my life and think I just ruined this judge's career, or, I just, and so I found out it's the law. She can quote the law all she wants. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? So, I no, I mean, I haven't said anything to her or about her, or I've never really told this story before in its entirety. It's only been fragmented to help me get through it. and it is painful. And that's why I wanted to do this, on a Saturday today, because it does take me a day to, you know, but you're right. I mean, and the thing about it is, Harry, like here's the thing about the whole story, right? So the reason that you and I do what we do is so that people they hear it and they go, "Oh my God, I went through, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know what it's like, to see a dead body. I know what it's like to see somebody who is at the end of their life and the violent, the ejection, But my dad sat at the dinner table. We ordered Berkeys. I remember it vividly. And he said, "Don't you dare file this lawsuit. I won't talk to you anymore." And then 2 years ago, on my back porch, after I got married, and after I went through my own suicide, after, everybody knows the story because it was very, that's when my dad finally tells me that he witnessed a suicide.
Hmm.
Do you know how much that would have saved me in suffering and pain
Yeah.
had he have just been able to say, "Listen," because it wasn't just like we saw the same. My God, hung himself. My dad, oh my God, the guy, my dad's, was a gunshot. So yeah, just not very similar. But all the other questions that I had, like of exiting life and being in that much pain, and we could have, we could have, and it never occurred to him that it would have helped me. Never. To this moment, he still regrets telling me the story
Mm.
because when he told it to me, I said, "Dad, why didn't you tell anybody?" And he said, "I told one person. I told my mother." And he goes, "Well, I told your mother too. But my mom, she dealt with severe, severe trauma as a child as well. She was not nine brothers and sisters. Her father passed away when she was young. Her mom was out and about. She raised her three younger sisters, very, very poor, Vincent's, Indiana. And my mom and my dad, they both are like, well, we didn't let all. They both say we didn't let our childhood in our previous life affect us, so we don't need to talk about it. That's what they
Mm.
said to me recent. Them, this is what they say to me now. And I'm covered in blood from them, covered in scars from from them having the inability to begin their healing journey. And the reason that they have an inability to create their healing journey or start their healing journey is because they don't know that talking helps.
Right.
And so that's why we got Harry, that's why we got me, that's why we got everybody else to show, hey, listen, I'm only alive because I started opening up. I started finding the people who could hear what I was just horrifically ashamed to say, saying, "Hey, man, trust me with your life." And then at night, I wake up and my fingernails break off in the wall because my nightmares are so bad. I'm like trying to tunnel out in my own bedroom. I couldn't have that conversation with anybody. I was afraid they were going to disbar me. But when I met other individuals with complex PTSD, boy, did I learn.
Mm.
They had to change their paint. And I mean,
Right.
it was so healing for me. So, yeah, I mean, it's important. No matter what, man, I'm here with you to talk about it.
Yeah. The talking is it is so important, and it's so overlooked because it like when you hear like, oh, just talk about it, you're like, "Pff, what's that gonna do? Like, really, what is sharing my
Right.
thing gonna do? It's just gonna make me feel worse and make me look weak, and it's never that is never the case."
Yeah, you're exactly right. And one thing with White Flag, we talked with investors and we talked with other individuals who've sold companies, and they say, "Well, where's the?" And they know it's at this point. We're talking to people who are very educated on it, but they go, "Where's the proof that peer support or talking about it helps?"
Hmm.
Other than the DSM manuals, medical guides saying that talk therapy and this, that, and the other. And I'm going, well, I'm telling you, I'm alive. And then then the experts weigh in and they say, when we sit in support groups, we watch the magic happen just between the individuals. But the reality of the situation is, man, we are at the precipice, the beginning of the next revolution. There was the Industrial Revolution. There was the Civil Rights Revolution. There was the technological revolution, which just took place in the 90s. And next, I promise you, is the mental health revolution. And what I mean by that is we are going to get to a point where everything, we don't have to talk about any of it. If we're not performing at our highest level due to our mental health or mental illness, then you go attack that first, then come to work.
Hmm.
Because 2 days of good mental health is better than somebody showing up for 40 hours a week who's struggling. So
Right.
once we start to learn that productivity is mirrored by mental health healing, then we're going to get everybody involved. But that's what you and I have to do because nobody else is doing it. There's nobody out. I mean, who do you think's the forefront speaker on mental health? The common household name? Nobody.
Hmm.
Nobody. It's not like we have a president of mental health or an organization of mental health that we look to say, hey, lead us, change the narrative, or we're going to replace you. And that's what we need to be doing. We need to have the people who have been through it, like yourself, like me, like others, out front dictating how this revolution is going to take place. And what I mean by that is we need to make sure that we are able to, number one, communicate with each other. Number one, that's the first thing. We need to be able to find each other because the secret sauce and the recipe is inside of us. That's what our experiences are. It's gold. It's gold inside of us that we lend to other individuals who are extremely poor in their mental health.
Hmm.
And and once we get to the point where employers, the government, and everybody's looking at us saying, all right, mental health comes first. Once we get to that point, then we're going to be all right as a society. Because once you understand mental health, you understand their actions. Then there's no innate need for revenge. There's no innate need for hate. There's no innate need for confusion. It's just, hurting people hurt people.
Hmm.
Hurting people hurt people. And if we want to stop somebody from hurting someone, we need to heal them. We can punish them for deterrence and retribution for society all we want. But if we really want to make this a harmonious place, we need to start finding a way to heal each other. And the only way I've found to do that is inside of each one of us, lending it to each other. That's why White Flag is where it is.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree, man. I mean, we're definitely on the right path, but hopefully we get there sooner rather than later. With you, now that you've shared your story, like I know you shared it with, your wife and the people that are close to you, but now that you've opened up about, how does it feel to let it all out?
I'll let you know in an hour.
Yeah.
Sitting here with you, man, with headphones on, it feels right. It feels good. Um, but even though I did ketamine infusions, and we'll tell your viewers all about that one day. But I still have anxiety a little bit. After the ketamine and the marijuana works and all that good stuff. So yeah, in a couple of hours, I'm sure I'll be like, well, I'm gonna hurt my mom's feelings. My dad's, he's gonna be very, very, very upset.
Yeah.
Um, but the reality of the situation is, um, people out there need to hear it, just like I needed to hear their stories. And that's the message. I'm sure they'll watch this. Mom, Dad, I love you all very much, very, very much. And I am who I am because of you. It's inside of me and forever will be. And I wouldn't even change the trauma or the tragedy. I just hope that you find peace at the end of your life here, and that you start your healing journey. Because I've only been quote unquote healed for a very short time, and it's like I began my life,
Mm,
and I hope that you begin yours.
yeah. Man. Whew. Yeah, that's also a big reason why, the people I talk to and myself personally, I can only really speak from my own experience, but it's a big reason why I hesitated for so long to ever publicly open up about anything, because I was like, am I
Yeah,
am I shaming my family? Am I shaming the people I love, the friends I have, like blah blah blah. I don't want to put them in a bad light, but I need to let this out. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, is they're conflicted between, well, I love everyone in my life, but I need to let this out because it's killing me
yeah,
inside.
yeah. No, and that is the issue. That is the conundrum. And if there was a way for us to communicate, I mean, because that generation, man, once we have kids, it's going to be much easier, right? Because our generation is a little bit more enlightened on what 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 communication does for you with strangers. Like my father used to always say, "Your family is all you got." family is all you got. It's all he ever said. And I don't
Mhm.
have any aunts, uncles. My grandparents were all, passed away long before. I don't have nobody in my family. So I'm sitting here thinking, well, I'm screwed then because this is the only thing I got to support me. And it's just not true, and that's what individuals need to know, that yes, it does hurt when you go in and you talk about your traumas because you're implicating all these people. And when you start to heal, the last thing that you want is to start beef with these people from your past and telling you that is not something that I want to deal with.
Yep.
But it's important for my journey. It's important for other people's journey. And the main lesson here is that that if let's say if my mom and dad hear this and they either don't react negatively or they say, I never saw it that way. I mean, dude, it'll be the best moment of my life. It'll be the best moment of my life if my mom and dad say, I just didn't see it that way. That's all I want. I don't want to hear I'm sorry. There's none of that. There's no apologies.
Mhm.
No, no, no. No.
Right.
Not even when I came home from rehab. Not even when I came home from trauma treatment after a suicide attempt. And I really hope to come back on the podcast and tell y'all, listen, mom and I are closer than ever. My dad, he's gotten a little bit of help. I think he's going to be okay. But I don't think that'll be what happens. I think that I will just feel okay with my decision, and that when I wake up tomorrow and there's a little less weight on my shoulders, I know that it'll have been the right way to do it because I've been thinking about it. How am I going to tell him? How am I going to address it to him like this? Because when I do, it's just a blow up. It's just a blow up. I went through more than you did. Are you kidding me? You should.
Mhm.
That's the typical. Well, your brothers were in your house. That type of thing. So, I really hope that courage to fight for yourself is what people see when they hear my story, because nobody's coming for you. Nobody. Not your parents, not your aunts, not your uncles, not your brothers and sisters. Nobody's coming in that dark place. They can't. They can't get down there. Some of them want to get down there desperately to help dig you out, but nobody can get all the way to you. You have to do this. And what we're telling you is this is opening up, is
Mhm.
feeling free, is feeling safe. So you have got to find a way, whether it's your boyfriend, your girlfriend, a pen pal, an anonymous person on White Flag, your therapist, or even your own family. You've got to find a way to pull out that dirty towel and wring it out, because it's killing you. It's poison. It's toxic. And if you don't, if you just say, I think I'm strong enough to make it through that. Look at me. Look at what happened to me, because my parents thought they were strong enough to get through it.
Mhm.
I've suffered so much. I've suffered so much. I can't even tell you how it has felt. The physical and physiological pain that I've had from anxiety, from PTSD, from flashbacks and trauma. When you get to that point, the cost of hurting someone's feelings in your family is outweighed by the benefit of easing your own suffering by just a millimeter. And so I hope that individuals, they don't guess that the blow up and the fallout from them starting to heal is going to be worse than the healing, or not worth it with the healing. Because I'm telling you, it's the only way out. It's the only way out. I tried drugs, alcohol, and by drugs, every prescription drug, all the alcohol, all the running, the marathons, the working out, all of it. And the only thing that ever worked was when I found somebody who understood what I was trying to say. It's the only thing that ever worked.
Mhm. Yeah. Man. Oh, I guess my last question for you, Johnny, is, you've gone through all of this, with all the trauma from your childhood and generational trauma and then the jail experience and everything afterwards. Excuse me. After going through your recovery currently from everything, like where are you today in comparison to when you first started opening up?
Man, yeah. No, so I first started opening up at the refuge when this was, half a decade ago, but that was when I first started talking about, you know, because other people were, I
Right.
mean, like, I was like, oh. you think that's bad, and then and um, and I immediately noticed a difference. I mean, hope, hope. I'll tell you this much, Harry. When people talk about being hopeless, it's like a Hallmark card. Don't be hopeless, people hope. I was there. I remember what it was like to have no hope. And I remember like trying to get there in my brain, like things are going to get better. Like there's a reason. I remember just thinking, I need to die. I need to leave this earth. It's too painful. Then after I started healing, talking, communicating, I got to the point where I was okay with dying. You know what I mean? Like uh, that's fine with me. Then it got to the point where I was either way, whatever happens. And then after about, it takes a while. After about a year, I was like, I'm going to fight for this life forever. That's the
Mm.
only thing I'm left to do is fight for this life. And when the colors started to come back, because I lost the ability to see colors and taste and all that good stuff. When it started to come back, I remember laying on my back. I was in a canopy of this forest in Ocala National Forest in Florida, and it's no phone, nothing. And they put you out there, and it's this majestic place. And all I remember is pain, pain, pain. Except for this one day, I was laying on the basketball court, and I'm looking straight up at the leaves, and I just see them move and move, and I can start to see the colors come back. And that was my sign I'm healing. And all of a sudden, they open up, and I'm just looking up at the sky, and they're holding back, looking up at the sky. And I just remember saying to myself, if you get me through this, I will dedicate my life. I will dedicate my life to helping other people heal. And that's all I've done. That's all that I've done since. And and I'm no different, if that is the pattern that happens when you start healing, imagine where society's headed.
Mhm.
Because that's what you're doing. I know it. That's what I'm doing. Once you're in that spot, it's like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. They go to Africa or all these third world countries all the time, and they keep coming back and adopting these individuals who are from, I'm not just using them as an example. And the reason is once you go to a place filled with good people, great hearts, and it's full of darkness, evil, and desperation, you can't stop thinking about it.
Mhm.
Something happens to you. You can't stop thinking about it. And that's what I do all day. I think about those people who are still down in that place that I was in. And then white flag is a ladder that we throw back down the hole. And that's what we hope other individuals do is climb out of that dark space and then shine some light back down so those people know that there's hope.
I love it, man. I love it so much. Where can my listeners find White Flag and more about you and everything if they want to
Yeah.
get involved?
So White Flag it's on the App Store, in the Apple App Store. It's on Google Play as well. You just download it. It's free. It's anonymous. You create a username. My username's Real McCoy. Nobody else has to give theirs out, but you can shoot me a message, say, "Hey, I heard what you were saying," and I'll talk back with you. It's how I engage on the app. You don't have to my pictures of a red panda. It's anonymous. It's as anonymous as you want it to be. And once you get on there and you see that there's a list of people who have raised their flag, and those individuals are similarly situated to you, however you put your profile. If you say I have anxiety, you say I have PTSD, all the people on your home screen list are going to have similar stuff with you. So you can just scroll and read their profile. You can read their issues and start learning about your own. You don't have to start talking with anybody. You can just start scrolling and getting familiar and, oh, what's that? Oh, my Lord, I think I may have that. That type of thing. And then eventually you can respond to somebody who's raised their flag and said, I want somebody to talk to. Or if you're comfortable enough, you can raise your own flag. So on white flag, you can either A, talk to somebody else who said, hey, I need somebody to talk to, or B, have somebody reach out to you. But either way, it's anonymous. There's a big contingency on there. We have thousands of people on there every day. So hopefully, somebody connects with you pretty quickly. But if not, some of our chats carry over for days and weeks and months. We have a lot of people who message us saying that they met close friends on there. And, so yeah, it's in the Apple App Store and on Google Play. You can go to www.whiteflagapp.com, whiteflagapp.com. And it's got all of our stuff on there. We recently announced a partnership with NFL tight end Hayden Hurst. he got picked up by the Cincinnati Bengals yesterday, so it was a big day for him as well as for us because we were really excited about him joining a Super Bowl contender. Hayden, he played football. He played professional baseball. Then he played college football at the University of South Carolina, where I went to school. He had a suicide attempt, came back, 25th overall draft pick in the NFL. Guys, he's a legend. And those are the type of people that we're bringing into our sphere of healing into White Flags so that other people see, it's the people we look up to who are dealing with this stuff. That's the only thing I could think of to help individuals was to go after, people who people look up to and who are influenced by. So if you out there, you have a following or, a contingency of individuals who are following you, give us a call or shoot us a message at White Flag and we'll loop you in. And, we want to help as many people as possible, one person at a time. And it's the most rewarding, most sensational experience that you'll ever participate in, helping someone through their day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And I'll put that link down below. Jonny, thank you, man, for coming on and sharing this story. I really appreciate it. And I know people who are listening are going to really benefit from this. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, Harry. You're doing great work, man. And, from one anxiety survivor to another, I hear you and I see you and I feel you and I appreciate you talking about your stuff, man. It means a lot to me and means a lot to the community as well. So thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. Keep doing the awesome work, man. And to all my listeners, I will see you guys next time.